Welcome to Super Meat World. Into this update, we're gonna play a chapter entitled C:/MeatBoy. Oh, way to go, random chapter creator. You've managed to make me find the right chapter once again. Even though that it probably should have been at 100%, but okay, maybe I'm just asking too much. So, we're gonna play we're just gonna call it C::MeatBoy from now on, because it's a whole lot easier to read. And as you've probably guessed by the looks of it, it's a 4-bit chapter, and it's really well made for the most part. It's a pretty straightforward chapter that has a whole lot of pretty imaginative tricks and obstacles, all used around the flashing blocks all like this, and it's really well done for the most part. And if there's one downside to this chapter, it's that most of these levels will be way too hard for most people to think about beating. This chapter doesn't really pull off any kind of special tricks or any weird things that you have to specifically do, but most of the jumps that you have to do into this chapter are really precise, and you gotta be at the top of your game in order to be able to do them. The great thing about this chapter is that none of the levels look like the other, even though they stick to the good old theme of the 4-bit level. And here we go, crash number 4. And to further add to the curiosity factor of the chapter, all of the levels are titled after file names that you will see on your computer. I don't think you will find any of them on a computer, but that's beyond the point. Unfortunately though, I do not know who made this chapter, because there was no threads about it on the Super Meat Boy forums back when level designing was pretty much the big thing and there were a few people out there who were working on their chapters. There was nothing on the Steam forums neither, and searching for the chapter on Google only netted videos of that chapter being played. So here we go. I unfortunately do not know who made this chapter, and it's a shame because, well, the person who made this chapter really deserves a round of applause for this chapter for the most part. Speaking of a round of applause, this level deserves one. You remember that one level from Paradise Lost in which you were chased by a gear through an obstacle course? Well, how about being chased by an obstacle, but you also have to chase the obstacle yourself in order to be able to finish it? It's almost as if Bandage Girl was trying to kill you into this one level. She's driving a main steamroller and she wants your doom because you're not good enough at rescuing her, you feeble hero. But yeah, this is the kind of tricks that really makes me appreciate this chapter a whole lot. In fact, I was not even sure if I was gonna be able to showcase this chapter in the first place, because before the recording of this one video, I was incapable of beating this one chapter. The first half of the chapter is pretty manageable, but the second half things get absolutely absurd and they pretty much become unmanageable to everyone except the most accurate hands out there. This level is a little bit more straightforward, but you gotta appreciate all of the little effort that the author went through in order to decorate the levels, in order to put all of these arrows out there, in order to decorate the level even more. The whole chapter really has a whole surrealistic atmosphere to it, and I really gotta appreciate some of the level layouts because it really makes a great use of the 4-bit palette. I was not a huge fan of the 4-bit levels into the regular game, but I really love those levels in comparison. However, this level has a gimmick that I'm not really fond of because, yeah, you have to backtrack through this one part because there is no way that you can break the blocks in order to make your way through the next part and being able to scale that wall before you're killed by the giant column of fire. Yeah, we're in 4-bit land, so everything has a significance. We're into the pits of fire and, oh yeah, this is where the difficulty of the chapter starts rocketing all the way to the top. Not only you need good timing in order to avoid all of the projectiles that are being shot by the... I'm not even sure what is supposed to be shot by these things, but yeah, you must avoid the 4-bit projectiles while avoiding all of the little columns there and there in the middle of the screen. And as you progress more and more through this level, the harder it becomes, so you can easily guess that I'm not a huge fan of this level for that one reason. You usually never put the hard parts like that at the very end, because not only almost every single part of this level is tricky to pull off, but it gets harder as you go through, so you become even more stressed out. Not to mention that it becomes really annoying after some time rippling through all of these parts. I mean, the last column is where pretty much all of the difficulty of the level is. With some practice, you can make it through almost all of these columns without too much problems, but the final jump that you have to pull off has to be pixel perfect. That's not really cool, but in the end, I can't really be too mad at it because, well, even I will make this mistake into my levels. There's a whole bunch of the levels that I've made which also pulled off this trick of putting the hardest stuff right at the end. Here goes the jump! Yeah, see how narrow this entire jump is? I mean, you press the button one fraction of a second too late and too early and you will fuck it up. There's no way to get around this, except to be really precise as hell. From now on, the game will not give you any kind of mercy. No, mercy is for people who cannot play this game. So here we go, we have a 4-bit forest level with little flashing blocks in order to replace the saw blades. They may be a whole lot smaller, but don't think that it'll make them any easier to avoid. Oh no, instead it's the contrary. Yeah, just by hugging this one wall, you can simply die because at one point you'll start hugging the flashing block and thus you will die. This is the chapter in a nutshell. You have to be precise, you have to be fast, and you finally need a whole lot of timing in order to fit through all of these tiny blocks that move back and forth in time. But at least the level design in terms of visual quality remains excellent through the entire chapter. For 4-bit, this really looks impressive. And in the background you can even see the saw blade bangs just in order to see where they start going back and forth through all of this. Even though it's 4-bit, we've got a whole lot of detail in there. Too bad that this game was not around back when the Atari was made, because this would have been a smash hit. And the difficulty would have been appropriate for the time, because you must remember about this whole time in video games where almost every single game out there was impossible. The good old days. As the saying says, out of the woods into the radioactive garden. I'm not really sure what is wrong with those flowers, but yeah. You're not around these parts in order to smell those flowers, because if so, your nose will melt. And here we have the equivalent of jumping over a saw blade into a tiny as hell corridor. In fact, I think these jumps are even harder to do, but as far as I know, this is the only time the chapter pulls off this trick on you. Too bad that it was at the end of the level, once again. This level seems like the direct successor to level 10, because now instead of being into the outer forest, now we're into the sawmill of the forest. Around this part, however, the level design gets a little bit less scattershot and has a little bit more of a continuity, but you will still see some levels that pretty much deviate from the script of the level, in which we're gonna end up into totally new and wacky locales. But starting from level 10, you start seeing a whole lot more saw blades. And this is also the first level of the chapter which has a bandage, if I remember properly. There's a few of them cropping through the entire chapter, and in fact this is the only time that I'm gonna collect it, because I didn't really feel like collecting it the other times after, because I've died here, and getting the bandage can be quite a pain in the ass. In fact, this whole level is a pain in the ass. Almost every section of this level is tricky enough to kill you, so you have to pay constant attention to what you're doing. Yeah, the opening segment is the only part of the level that I will consider easy. Other than that, everything is threatening. And once again, let's see how close this will get. Another really close call here. You have to pay attention to the way that the saw blade moves back and forth. There's really no room to maneuver here. Not at all. And the worst thing is, I had to practice before I played this chapter, because even then I didn't even know that I will be able to make it through the chapter to begin with, considering that at this point the chapter gets really hard. In fact, when I started recording, I never managed to beat this one level. But with that said, I died at about 2 inches of the goal, so I was like, nah, fuck this, I'll be able to beat it whenever the time will come. And surprise, it only took me about 2 or 3 tries this time around. It's better than my first time through, where it probably took me something like 50 deaths and I was not even close to finishing the level. This level, however, can show you how really annoying the collision detection with the flashing blocks can be into this one level. Even though that you think you've made a jump successfully, one part of your body may end up colliding into the blocks, even though you're quite far away from it and you will die. Okay, not this time because I really hit it full on, but this other time previously, I pretty much just hit the extremity of my right character onto it, and yet I died. And don't ask me why I didn't even try to go for the bandage here, because it really seems easy, but I just guessed that I didn't want to take any chances and wanted to finish this level so that I can move on to the rest. The worst is yet to come. Starting from this chapter, you can see that the chapter will go from featuring various locals, then it was the forest, after that you had some winterland in which you had to avoid all sorts of snow and ice, and finally you're into a computer. The last few levels of the chapter will end up resembling this one, however, they will be wildly different in terms of obstacle. In fact, this is the easiest one of the bunch, but yeah, don't try to do this jump this way because you simply won't have the time to curve around in order to do the jump successfully. But this level, compared to most other levels in the chapter, feels a little bit bland compared to the other. I mean, it conveys the feeling of a computer tech base rather well, but it just doesn't look as impressive as the other levels which take place in nature and other kind of wacky locales like the carnival with all of the wild colors everywhere. I really like the concept of this level and how you have all of these little cages in order to offer you protection from the bars. I mean, there's a whole lot of levels out there that aren't 4-bit, but yet don't have this kind of detail in them. This level puts more emphasis on being quick instead of having to do precise stuff. Avoiding the giant... I don't know, is that a firewall or something like that? I don't know, I'm not really good with this kind of technical detail, but yeah, you have to be really fast here. You cannot afford to lose any kind of time in order to jump out of the way. Once again, this is another level in which I've died a lot before recording, and yet, for some reason, it only took me about 2 or 3 attempts in order to make it through the other time around. For some reason, this level really reminds me of one of the levels from the Kids Warp Zone, the one in which you had 5 little shafts where you were going up, down, and going up and down elevators, but this time around we won't have any kind of elevators and we must avoid all of these nasty flashing bars all over the place. With that said, it's a pretty neat touch to see all of the connection between all of the little ports and all of the little flashing things that you see there and there. From all of the computer theme levels of the chapter, this is probably the most impressive one of the bunch. I really like the look of this level. It's pretty lively and yet it manages to be really nice to look at. I also sort of like all of the little elevator-like things that, well, they're not really elevators considering that they kill you, but, well, you still get the point. Once again, you need a whole lot of timing in order to make it through these one section. Okay, it didn't turn out well this time around, but I was just kinda sloppy here. This is really not the hardest part of the level here. Actually, the rest of the level is pretty easy, well, except this one jump here, but honestly, this is not the most grueling thing that you've had to do into this one chapter. Oh no, it didn't. In fact, the most grueling thing of the chapter is coming really soon. Yep, we have to play this level again, but in 4-bit format this time around. Even though the recreation of this level is pretty spot on and it's pretty faithful to the original level, which was an expert remix, I just don't feel this is the most imaginative end to the chapter that there could have been. At least the level feels slightly easier because it doesn't look as if it's as unforgiving as it was into the original level, but I think that the blocks are much wider than the spikes, but in order to compensate for that, there's less of them, so you have a little bit more freedom with your movement here. In comparison to the original puberty level, this one feels a whole lot easier and a whole lot lenient. With that said, that still doesn't make it an easy level. Yeah, considering that you can just die by walking on the floor, once again. Honestly, my biggest obstacle through this one chapter was walking onto blocks that were really not into the way, but okay, here we go, final jump, here we go! And we're finally done with the horrors of assembly because we've succeeded in vanquishing MeatBoy, which is made by a guy out there who, I don't know who you are, but your chapter was pretty good. And that'll be it for this video. Oh wait, actually it's semicolon. I just suppose that there are characters that you couldn't have in total level listing, so I guess this is it. Coming up next, it's Christmas time in Super Meat World. The Kids Xmas by Team Meat.